In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
3, 2, 1, action.
All right. Well, welcome back, guys, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you guys are listening to. This is episode 2 of Tea with Thomas, and today we're so honored to be joined by none other than one of our dearest fathers, or as we like to call him, Achin, because Achin means father in our language, Father Jerry Mathew. So, Father, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, just want to kind of just start off real quickly, but yeah, Achin, how's your day? How's everything going? We hope that you're doing well, and yeah, how's everything going?
It's been good. It's actually a monumental day in my life because one of the translation projects I started 2 years ago was completed today and sent to our bishop, who will then send to the Synodal Commission. It's the translation of the whole Taxa. So the entire book that we use for the Syro Malankara Holy Kurbana or Mass has been fully translated. Before now, we had a 12-year-old book which had the bare essentials with just 6 anaphoras. Now we have all the 9 anaphoras and all the prayers and all the songs that we need for a complete and diverse Holy Kurbana for any time of the year.
That is amazing.
That's great.
Thank you. Thank God.
Good job, Acha. Good job. I know you've been putting a lot of work into that.
Yeah, you can see that on my face and on my hair and the receding hairline.
No, it's kind of inspiring for us, especially. I'm trying to remember back to like when I first met you, right? And it's funny because in my phone, instead of putting you on my phone, it's like Father Jerry. It's always been Brother Jerry for a long time as well. And I'm trying to remember. And then at one point, I realized, because you had come to our church, and I'd realized, why do I have him saved still as Brother Jerry? I need to switch it as soon as I can. But yeah, it's been crazy just how long you've been part of our lives. You know, for some of us, it's been a long time. For some of us, it's very new, and for others, it's, you know, they've never met you before. But especially for us, our youth, you've been a really active member of our own lives. So just want to thank you for that. And yeah, I just want to kind of start off by saying thank you. For me personally, I feel like Kason can also share some of his own experiences with Achin as well. But yeah.
I mean, Jerry Achin, I think we met like 4 years ago. I think it was in COVID time.
2000, during COVID time. It was after an
2020
call.
Yeah, it was in an MCCO call. I think you were doing a talk.
Yes.
Basically for the MCCO student. I was there. I mean, I was just getting into the Malankara faith because, you know, at least in my earliest recollection, you know, I'm just starting to find my way through the faith, the traditions, the liturgy, all that. So, and I had a lot of questions at the time. Being Christian, being a Catholic, you know, it was a discerning time for me, trying to figure out what's true, what's not true, what the church teaches versus what I'm seeing in the world.
Yeah.
And I think God put you in that place to show me that. It's because to go into the specifics is that Jerry Achin was doing a talk, and after the talk, I had some questions regarding what was said at
evolution, creation, different things. Yeah.
Exactly.
You remember everything.
I think I think you were specifically talking about the Bible, the validity of the Bible, right, and and specifically adhering to the Bible. And I hit up like you on WhatsApp, and I said, "Can I call you? I have some doubts. I have some questions." And you said yes. Ready. I'm like, okay, this is the first time an Achin is so prompt in answering a question. And he's like, yeah, I never talked to Jerry Achin before this. And that was our first ever meet. I remember I was standing in my bedroom. I didn't sit down. I was just pacing. I was just walking back and forth, calling you. I never sat down for that one. And it was great because we talked about various topics.
Yeah,
like
a lot of topics,
like contextualizing Book of Revelations, like what's happening here, the myths of the book, like are there myths? Are they actually talking about a prophecy in the future? We talked about the Immaculate Conception of our Mother. Exactly. Philosophy. We talked about what did we talk about? Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, and so many things like magisterium of the Catholic Church, so many things, and other dogmas that I had doubts about, and you were able to at least point me to the right direction with your knowledge and with the sources that you found in your training, in your upbringing, right? And that was great. And we talked like intermittently for through the times, and eventually we met in person at a camp in Texas, in
Yes.
Denton, Texas, Camp
And,
Spark, and that's where I also met my boy Aaron here.
Aaron.
So yeah. Aaron, do you recall like that, our memory of
Yeah.
that?
I mean, I remember, I think we had talked about it in our first episode about how we met.
Mhm.
But it's also just incredible, like you, Kason, you sharing that story of having that conversation, right? Even though it was just a one-on-one conversation, now we're blessed to be having this platform where we're able to share these conversations to anyone and everyone who's willing to listen and learn along with us, right? I just it's just such a beautiful thing for me to kind of just be here right now in this present moment. And especially to pick at Jerry Hutchins' brain a little bit, just on his knowledge, but also the knowledge of our church as a whole, right? We are blessed with such a wealth of knowledge, such a treasure trove that I hope this episode will help in starting to pick at that and kind of share that wealth of knowledge with the rest of our community as a whole. So, but before we get to that, I think what happens every time people meet Achin is that we'll all have like these side conversations because everyone have like these like little moments of like, oh, like let's learn about Achin, right? What's Achin's story? And it's for me, it's like I feel like I get like a little bit, and then I learn about a little bit more from someone else, and then it's always like these little stories, and I don't have like a complete like picture of it. So I felt like one of the first things that I wanted to really ask you, Achin, was let's just ask it to you directly. Achin, what is your story? What is your discerning to priesthood story like? How did that happen? How did that occur?
Well, I always like to say it's not a lightning and thunderbolt story. It's very boring, but that's how it is. God doesn't usually use big, huge events to call you. It's a still silent sound from the silence that calls you in, and that's what happened to me. I've been an asthmatic since the age of 2 till the age of 10. Thankfully, it was gone after that. And it was during that time that I spent a lot of time in bed. My mom used to sit beside my bed, checking my pulse to see if I was even alive because my pulse was that shallow. So it was during that time that I kind of discerned, tomorrow is not guaranteed for me. So if there is a tomorrow, what's going to happen? And I heard this, I don't want to say a sound or a calling, but a pull. And which led me to say that, God, you are giving me tomorrow. So I'm going to give you everything that you have given me in that tomorrow. So all the gifts I have received, I'll be, using to serve you. And, in due time, it became very clear that it was as a priest. So, that was all in India. I came to US when I was 13 years old. And even then, the call didn't go away. In fact, it got stronger, and everything that I dealt with kind of solidified that calling to priesthood. So yeah, that's the basis of it. Like I said, it's a very, very boring, it's nothing very stark or attention grabbing.
It's funny that you call it as boring because I feel like for us it's such a unique thing. One of the things that I start like telling my kids when like in Sunday school, but like not just my 11th graders, but I tell to anyone, especially little kids that I meet, is the fact that especially when you're young, it's always amazing to hear other people's stories, right?
Yeah.
Because each person's stories is like their own journey, their own action movie.
Yes.
And it's amazing to kind of hear it because all of us are so different, right? And especially your journey from India to the US, like we'll talk about later on with our faith as well, from India to the US. It's such an important parallelism to our faith journey as a whole and to your story and to each of our stories as well. But yeah.
Yeah. Also, Jariacha, I mean, it's rare when people, when you recollect a story, it's common for people to blame God and say, God, why have you forsaken me? Like, why are you doing this to me? Right. And you, like, every time I hear this story, because I've heard a couple of times already because of personally speaking and all that, and you, whenever I hear it, it's like it's a calling for me to say, just like Jariachin did with his life, he used his calling, his difficulties that he had, like with asthma, with struggles, he ultimately offered that before God, before the feet of our Christ, and that is super important and something that I think as youth, as any person in life, we ought to do is when we have difficulties like that, we are supposed to turn that into a moment of learning, a moment of love, a moment of, we are having a difficulty that essentially will point us in the right direction if we are able to see through it, right?
It's interesting you say that because now I was thinking, why did I see it that way? Instead of seeing it as a tragedy, and it's mainly because my parents had like this media ban in our house, so we could only watch TV for 1 hour on Saturdays evening as a family. So any entertainment I got was from reading books, which included the Bible, and I loved the Old Testament. It's people who are not familiar with Old Testament misses all the drama and the interesting aspects of the Bible. In the New Testament, it's more toned down, you can say, but in the Old Testament, it's very dramatic.
It's a reality TV show.
You think Game of Thrones or something else is bloody? Read the Old Testament, and that's where you see all these human figures going through this tragic times, like Joseph, for example, or Jacob, and God uses all that hard times into something greater. So I think that was kind of in the back of my head that gave me strength that God will use this for something greater too, and He has been, thank God.
Yeah, it's really important that you said that, because like you said, He really has been using your mission in your life to bless so many different people.
I hope so.
And yeah, I mean, I'll keep singing your praises, because it's absolutely true.
Yes.
But especially for me, I think one of the things that I always want to know as well is from your story, because your story is an ever evolving one, just like each of our stories is an ever evolving one. What are some of the experiences specifically as a priest that you can call back to and I guess say like, okay, this was either, maybe you can say your most memorable or most important or most impactful, however you want to define that question.
There's another thing I always tell people. It's every day, it's an adventure. You get up in the morning, you look at the phone, that's when your day kind of falls into place. And even then that changes. You can never plan too far ahead. So each day is an adventure, so much so that I don't remember like any big, huge events. But again, there are some. So I would say one of the main experiences that I've had as a priest was being able to bless people with the gloves of Saint Padre Pio. So I was in New York at that time, and I was invited to a church which I've never been to hear confessions and also give a 30-minute homily. And then I didn't know, but the glove of Saint Padre Pio was there, and that's what they asked me to bless the people with. So things like that. And another interesting aspect is that I've been to different countries as a priest, and no matter where I go, if I show my credentials as a Catholic priest, I can celebrate the Holy Mass in any country. And I've done that in Sweden, in Austria, in France at the Sacré-Cœur Cathedral. So it really shows how universal the Catholic Church is, and that priestly brotherhood. It's not, there is no boundary of language or culture. If you are a Catholic priest, you are a Catholic priest anywhere you go. And you are a brother to any Catholic priest in any part of the world. So yeah, those are some of the interesting, there are many more, but these are the two that kind of pops into my mind right now.
Wow. You blessed the people with the gloves of St. Padre
Yes.
Pio?
Yeah, and it had the
That's
blood stains of.
crazy.
Wow,
That's crazy.
that is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Wait, quick question though. Is there a Catholic priest ID card?
Yeah, so when you are in Rome, it's normal to get what's called a cerebral, which shows that you are a student of a Catholic university residing in a specific house, and it shows that you are a Catholic clergy, and you can use that as identification wherever you go. That's the easy way to identify you as a priest.
Did not know that. I
Yeah.
will ask my Uchin about his.
It's usually it's only for people who are in Rome usually.
Okay.
Otherwise, the local bishop. So, for example, our bishop, Monsignor Ivanios, will write a letter saying that he's a Catholic priest. He is known to me. All of that things. It's called the letter of suitability. You have to have that if you go to another church.
Okay. Very interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing that little tidbit.
No
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's very interesting.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
that's amazing.
yeah. I feel like we've talked a good bit upon Jerry Uchin's history, right? A little bit of kind of his impact that he's made upon us and upon the community as a whole. And of course, we're going to get to more of that later on. But I think what we really wanted to talk about, especially in this episode, was really reflecting on our church specifically, the Syro Malankara Catholic Church. I know that in our last episode, we had talked a little bit to just generally state on our own backgrounds. And of course, we've stated that we are Malankara Catholics. And of course, Jerry Uchin does belong to the Malankara Catholic Rite as well. But yeah, just to start off, I think we what we really wanted to do was to put ourselves in perspective by placing ourselves in history, right? Showing ourselves where we are, looking back at it, understanding the time frame of our church as it grew, and settling into where we are now. And so we're hoping that we can, through this episode, kind of share our story through a wider lens of not just, the podcasters, but also someone in clergy who has more of a knowledge and insight as well. And so, Jerry Etchen, thank you again for coming.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think to start off, of course, we have to talk about the country of India itself, right? It's of course, a lot of us, it's our like native homeland. Some of us were born there, some of us were not. But looking back, I think for me, like the education of understanding where how our church started was from our Sunday school times, or CCE, CCD, however you want to call it. And learning about it, I think the one important figure that we all learn about at the beginning of the growth of our church in India is Saint Thomas, right? Yeah, it's the way that he was able to come in and spread the gospel and continue Jesus's mission to spread the gospel to many countries, and making his way to India, and how that started off is so inspiring to just look back on.
Yeah, and one of the things that's very interesting about Saint Thomas is that he's the one, who in the Gospels, he's the one who clearly doubted, but he's also the one who clearly went the farthest to spread the gospel. So, one of the things I always tell, people who ask me, I am having doubts about my faith. I feel like I'm losing my faith. I'm like, that's a good thing. This is an opportunity for you to clarify what the faith teaches, and thus deepen yourself in that faith so that God can use your faith to influence a lot more people later on, because a blind faith is not a true faith. The faith has to be tested. It has to be backed by reason. So yeah, St. Thomas, he came to India in AD 52. He established 7 churches in our state, in Kerala. And then later he went to Tamil Nadu to serve as a missionary, which is where he was martyred at Mylapore in AD 72. So that's where the Christian history, or the Catholic history, begins in India, which is then followed by the help of Persian missionaries later on. And then, skipping a big chunk of time, we come to 16th century, where the Portuguese missionaries come, and then, the church, the face of the church kind of changes in its appearance. So yeah, but I'm sure we'll have to go more in detail to that.
Yeah, I mean, Jariacha, so are there a lot of documentation during that time period, from the time of St. Thomas to at least when the Latin, well, not the Jesuits actually came? Yeah, is there any sort of documentation that we could refer to or know about or read that
Yes,
shows the presence of St. Thomas and others?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So this is something that I had to look into as part of my doctorate. And some of the authors I would recommend are Georgis Stadiat, Father Georgis Stadiat, who wrote the Malankara Catholic Church. It's a complete history of the Malankara Catholic Church. And also Kairichan, it's a book in Malayalam. It's called Bhagingal Purnamadam Paradisa. Then there's one by Tisarant, that's in English, which is called Eastern Christianity in India. So all of these are like the major sources. There are plenty more that we can give in terms of reference to the history in India. In terms of evidence to Catholic Church or Christianity in India from the 1st century, we can see documents from outside India. So leaders like Pantanius, who came in AD 190, David of Basra in 295, Theophilus 354, Cosmos, and both 6th century. All of these people have reports of being to India or Christianity in India even before like 5th century or 6th century. And Pantanius, or Pantanius, as we would say in Malayalam, the church historian Eusebius of Caesarea says that Pantanius saw the Gospel of Mathew in Aramaic with the Christians in India. That was in 2nd century. So the existence of Christians in India from 1st century onwards is clear. And there's also other evidence like the copper plates and the migrations from West Asia. So there's plenty of evidence, but the problem is that any paper documents that we have had were destroyed at the Synod of Diamper when they were all burned. But we will get to that. Yeah, we'll get to that. That was a part of trying to change the Malankara traditions and more Latinizing it.
Acha. Also, quick
Mhm.
question, or pretty much a long question in this sense. Yeah, it's a long time history. Yeah. So there was a lot of ecumenical councils, right? And the ones that we reading in our catechesis.
Mhm.
And I was curious because a lot of heresies, a lot of debates were happening during those times.
Right.
And how did the Church of India, at least at the time, have a connection with where, let's say, Nicaea, Constantinople, Ephesus, right? How did we have a connection with the Middle East at the time? So, right, because there was a lot of councils, a lot of debate, a lot of heresy traveling here and there. How do we get finalize the idea of the Trinity, right? Like, how do we consolidate to that idea? And because there was a lot of confusion, right?
Right.
So, can you tell us more about that? Because
Sure.
I'm curious to know.
So I hinted at it before. So basically, our connection with the Holy See, with Rome, was through Persian missionaries. And that was because the Malankara Church in India, or the Nasrani Christians, as we were called, or Mar Thoma Christians, we did not have bishops, native bishops. We had native priests and deacons. So for bishops, we relied on the Persian missionaries and the Persian bishops. So it was through them that we had connection to Rome. And even at the Council of Nicaea, one of the bishops signed his name as Bishop of India. So it goes back, so the connection was always there. Now that connection got separated later on when the presence of the East Syriac bishops became less, or they were kind of blocked by the Portuguese missionaries and government. But that's how the church was protected from heresies and things like that. Now, the interesting thing is that the Malankara Church in India was accused mainly of Nestorian heresy, but it was more of a political move to bring the Malankara Church under the control of the Jesuits, or the Latin Rite missionaries, to make them more Latinized. But even the people who tried to do that, they saw that the title Mother of God, which is completely against the Nestorian heresy, they found the title of Mother of God in the Malankara liturgy that was existent there, which was the East Chaldean liturgy. So I know I'm throwing out a lot of terms there, but basically to say that as far as we know, there is no credibility to the accusation that the church practiced or even taught Nestorian heresy, which was the main heresy that we were accused of.
Interesting. Yeah, I think this might be a really good time for us to kind of introduce in a timeline, and that way we can kind of show a progression.
Yes.
And I think we have a timeline ready right now to share. But basically, if we can bring it up, what we're seeing is at the beginning, like we talked about, the start of where it says inception, right? Where St. Thomas was able to share Christianity itself to the people of India. And then from there, we move into where it shows on that 4th century, the starting of an East Syrian relationship. And then eventually we get into that first Synod of Diamper. I think that's the first main event that we would really want to be talking about.
Right.
Is that right, Achin?
Right, yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of context of exactly what happened in that event?
Sure. So we have to remember that the Portuguese first came to India in 1498. Following that, they brought the missionaries there, which basically they saw the church in India and recognized that it is Christian, it is more or less Catholic, but it is completely different from what we are familiar with. As in the Jesuit Portuguese missionaries were not familiar with the Eastern or East Syriac liturgy that was present there. So they tried to impose their rites and liturgy onto the people who were in India, which of course, it's not going to go well. You are coming and telling your people who've been practicing for almost, 15 centuries a liturgy and saying that, you have to change it right now in order to be correct. People, of course, are not going to like it. So this, I'm going to make a very long story short. The Portuguese missionaries, through their bishops, tried to impose this changes, these Latinizations, onto the church that was in India, especially in Kerala. And one of the main events through which it was done was at this Synod of Diamper, and that was in 1599. And what happened there was that the bishop at the time, Bishop Meneses, came there and he called a synod and said that anyone who does not attend, they'll be excommunicated, and there were severe impositions. And even before doing that, he went around churches and did priestly ordinations, consecrated Holy Muron or Chrism, conducted Holy Week services. All of that happened. So in 1599, the circular to convene the synod was sent out. It was attended by 153 priests and 660 lay representatives. The proceedings of the synod included a profession of faith and also proclamation of canons and decrees. The problem is, in a synod, these proclamations and canons, they should come out of that synod. In this synod, it was pre-prepared. So it was basically imposing what Bishop Meneses already had prepared onto the people. On top of that, the see that was there, as in we can say the diocese that was there, was brought under the Latin control. And that diocese was divided into 75 parishes, and the priests appointed by this Latin Rite bishop were appointed to these, to these parishes. And then they were given the order of sacramentary that was translated from Latin to Syriac, surplices as would be used in the Latin Rite, the sacred vestments, for mass, altar cloths, everything that would be Latin were given to these priests. He even tried to impose the breviary or the divine office, which is what priests and the religious have to pray every day. He tried to impose the Latin breviary into the Malankara Church, but that was strongly protested. So he contented himself with translating the alleged errors in the Syriac books. So that's where Meneses, or Bishop Meneses, alleged Nestorian heresy on the Syriac liturgical books, and thus tried to stop the East Syrian bishops from coming, and burned many Syriac books, including historical documents and ancient documents. So that was kind of the thing, the event that led to what's called the Bend Cross Oath, or the Coonan Cross Oath of 1653. So that's a whole lot of history in 2 minutes right there.
That is a lot of history. I mean, thank you for taking us through at least to the Coonan Cross Oath.
Right.
That is actually a pivotal point
Yes.
in India,
Yes.
and for our faith that we see currently, because eventually you get to the reunion moment and you'll understand why the reunion moment was the movement was there for, right?
Right.
So that is great. Thank you so much for that.
Mhm.
I had some doubts. Is there any sort of current was there a lot of contention at that time, physical, any sort of violence at the time? It was very peaceful. How was it? Is there any documentation on that? The
Between
Jesuits
the
and the Malankara?
Latin Rite. So there were riots.
Yeah.
From the books mentioned riots. We don't know how violent it got, but it was enough to convene a synod, and then later on, they were so furious that they took an oath with a rope, or with 4 ropes tied to a cross, and that's how the name came. Bent Cross Oath, because the cross was bent with all the people hanging on to it. So so there were riots. We don't know how extreme it was.
Yeah, I mean, this happened in Mattancherry, in Cochin, Ernakulam, right? And it's still there. It's like the church of the Coonan Cross is there, that in Mattancherry, if you could go. But that's some great history, actually, if you ever visit Kerala, if you want to go and see.
And one of the two main things people don't realize is that the oath that was taken with all these people, priests and the faithful, taking this oath, what they actually said was they would never remain under the Sampallur Padris, or Saint Paul priest, as long as our generations continue to exist. Now, Saint Paul priest means the priest of the house of Saint Paul, which was a Jesuit house in Kerala. So they basically were trying to cut off the Jesuit influence, but in effect, what happened was that they lost communion with Rome because the East Syriac bishops were already cut off, and now they are cutting themselves off from the Portuguese missionaries, or these Jesuits at least. So now, the people who took the oath, they don't have a connection with Rome. The second interesting point is that we would think that, it might be just 100 people there. No, it was 25,000 priests and lay people who were taking this oath, hanging on to these 4 different crosses. 25,000. So you can see the zeal of the people to keep their traditions, to keep their faith as they know it. So that's the faith of our fathers right there. So
yeah, that is the faith of our fathers. When I ever look back, I don't know my great-great-grandfather, but we just have an imagination of them, right? Like, so when we imagine our great-great-great-grandfathers and mothers, we think they fought for this. They had a big part in who we are. So
yeah, totally.
A part of tradition is to carry on, give it to the next generation. So we understand that the moments of contention is when we come together and hold hands together, and we make a stance and we believe in what's right and move on with it. So it goes all the way back to the earliest century, and it still happens in between, and it's still happening at some moments of in life in the world right now, under persecution.
Right. Yeah.
The Christians are largely persecuted in Middle East and different areas, and
even northern parts of India.
Yeah, exactly. So these persecution will come and go. So and we have to stand together strong. So I think this is a great moment. Whenever I read this, I try to imagine greater than what I'm reading in the text or in the catechesis. Right. So yeah,
I think it's really special seeing just in history the strength of our faith, right? How strong people's voices were, how some people just call it headstrong, right? Or stubbornness, but I think the other part of it is such a strong will to fight for the faith, to fight for what's right. And for me personally, like I look back to not just to that far in history, but also just like our forefathers, right? Like our grandparents, our great grandparents, the ones that we know. Some of them might actually be there around that time as well, but also the people who who taught us our own faith, were the ones taking care of us when we were younger, the ones who instilled upon that faith, our godfathers, our godparents, right? They're really important peoples in our lives. So it is a beautiful thing to look at. I do, however, think that we should go back a little bit and kind of reflect back on the ideas of what exactly happened when the Portuguese missionaries came in, right? And so we had talked about that for briefly before we moved on, as we're currently talking about Coonan Crossroads, but going back, when the Portuguese missionaries had come in, right, Jesuits, the whole aspect of Latinization itself, does that, when we say Latinization, do we then say that the Church of India before then was not Catholic? How does the aspect of being Catholic apply here?
Okay, so amazing question. So, that's a very common mistake that is seen even in the current Catholic population, that the Roman Rite is the only Catholic rite. That's not how it is. Catholic means universal. And Jesus sent out his apostles all over the world, and wherever they went, they established churches that took the kind of like the accent of the culture. So the church established in Antioch would have the cultural tinges of Antioch. The church that was established somewhere else, in Africa, it would have an African tinge. So all of them are Catholic, but it would have the cultural accent, and that, especially in time, would show itself in very diverse expressions. So even if you compare, Eastern churches between the current Malankara Rite and the current, let's say, Byzantine Rite, there are similarities. The faith is all the same, but the way the faith is expressed, whether it is the liturgy, the way the mass is celebrated, or the vestments, the way prayers are said, the language that is used, all of that is different, but the faith is the same. So it's different accents used to produce the same faith. It's basically like, the French would kiss you to greet you. In the US, you would shake, hands with people to greet you. It's the same thing that is performed or that is shown. It's care or greeting or welcoming, but it's shown in different ways. So the church in India had it had the East Syriac language and the Indian accent. The
Okay.
Latin Rite missionaries came. They did not recognize this as fully Catholic. They knew it was Catholic, but not as fully Catholic. So they tried to bring it under their control. So that's
I
kind of like
see.
the long way of answering that question.
No, but that is important to kind of understand, because I think,
Yeah.
like you said, there's like that misnomer of not exactly identifying what Catholicism or like the
Right.
word Catholic exactly means.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Catholic Church, it's called the Catholic Communion, and
Yes.
that has one Western Rite and 24 Eastern Rites. All of them are just as Catholic as the other rites,
Right.
or other churches.
Exactly.
And each
Right.
church has its own rites or traditions and rituals.
Yeah, you're right about that, Acha. Even today there's a lot of confusion on what the word
Mhm.
Catholic means.
Yeah.
And I actually had one today. Honestly, I had one today. I was talking to another friend of mine. He's from Telangana. He's also Christian, and he was confused on the word Christian and Catholic.
Right.
And I had to explain to him to the what it means, the definition that you just took us through. I had to do that same thing. So of course I get to refresh my meaning of the Catholic, what Catholic means, what Christian, everything means in synthesis with what I could say and what I could do. So so that's essentially what I had.
I hope that answered the question, Aaron.
Oh, absolutely. No,
Okay.
I think it's good for me to kind of make sure that we're kind of setting that definition clear to everyone,
Mhm.
so people kind of truly understand exactly what it means to be part
Yeah.
of a Catholic church, right?
You're
So
right.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, let's. I think now at this point we can now go back to what we were just talking about, right? The Coonan cross oath. We talked about especially like the passions and the fiery emotions that were behind it, right?
Mhm.
But let's kind of get into like the ramifications of exactly what that had caused to a degree the timeline of the church's history in India.
Mhm.
So what
Okay.
exactly came out of it?
So basically, right after that Coonan Cross Oath, which was on January 3rd, 1653, at 3 p.m. actually, the parish representatives who were there, they met later at Edapalli and passed a resolution stating that they will not accept any more Jesuit bishops, but they were okay with either having native bishops, Malankara bishops, or bishops from any other religious orders like Carmelites or anybody else other than the Jesuits. And when that kind of confusion, that kind of what do you call it? Yeah, let's say confusion. When that confusion is going on, that uncertainty is going on, somebody produced this fabricated document saying that Bishop Ahatalla, who is the East Syriac bishop, who was trying to come to Kerala and who was prevented from coming, and the rumor was that he was killed, and that's the immediate thing that kind of brought forth the Coonan Cross Oath. So anyway, the rumor was that Bishop Ahatalla gave permission to ordain a Malankara bishop by the imposition of hands, or by placing the hands of 12 priests on another priest. Now, we know that nowhere in Catholic Church can priest ordain a bishop. So, of course, that was an invalid ordination. So, this archdeacon who was there at the time, Thomas de Cambo, was ordained as Mar Thomas first, of course, invalid ordination. Then the truth came out, and representatives from Rome were sent to resolve the situation. There were two delegations. They were Carmelites, both of them. One was led by Joseph Sebastiani, or Father Joseph Sebastiani, and the other one was Father Hyacinth. Upon them coming to India, the archdeacon, who was invalidly ordained, said that he was prepared to relinquish the episcopal insignia, basically say that he will, he won't use the bishop vestments and things like that. But what happened, long story short, is that this Sebastiani, he excommunicated Archdeacon Thomas. And then another bishop who was, no, actually, Sebastiani himself became a bishop after being consecrated in Rome with the title Apostoliate Vicariate of Malabar. So he became the bishop for the Malankara Christians in Kerala who did not want to accept the Jesuit bishops.
Okay.
Are we good so far?
Yeah.
So we got the archdeacon who is excommunicated by the this Bishop Sebastiani, who was sent to resolve the matters.
Mhm.
Then the people accepted Sebastiani as their apostolic vicar, and then discussions continued with the excommunicated archdeacon, and things were going well. But because the Dutch captured Kochi and Kodungalur, this Bishop Sebastiani had to go back. He had to leave the country because
Oh.
now the Portuguese are not in charge anymore. The Dutch is. And
wow.
before leaving, the Bishop Sebastiani, he excommunicated the archdeacon.
So it's
and
not.
he
Yes.
ordained another priest as a bishop.
Yeah. So in the end of it, it's not just the, I guess, the politicalness of the faith, but it's also politics outside as well.
Oh,
When the
definitely.
Dutch also came in.
Yes, yeah.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
all of that have ramifications on what happens to the church that is in Kerala, in India.
It goes to show that there is still, we try to maintain order when things got confusing even, right? Like, for example, the ordination of a bishop, right? It's not done just by having, 12 achins going and
Ordaining.
placing of hands
Right.
and ordain have a bishop, right? It doesn't,
Mhm.
of course, when you hear it, it doesn't seem right. And that is essentially, there's an order to things. There's the order of the apostles, like how the apostolic succession has on the Catholic Church, right? How
Mhm.
prevalent it is, and how seriously we take that
Yeah.
in our faith, in our tradition. So when stuff like that happens, it's very doubtful, and it causes a lot of disruption in the church.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
just to say like a little bit more, just to clarify where things are right now. So right now, Bishop Sebastiani has appointed a new bishop, Malankara bishop. His name is Alexander de Campo. The other one was Thomas de Campo, Archdeacon Thomas de Campo. Now there are two groups. There is the Alexander de Campo group, which practice the East Syrian liturgy, but with the Latinized version. And then there is this other group who don't have a valid bishop, who is under Archdeacon Thomas de Campo. It is at this time in 1665, remember 1653 was the Coonan Cross Oath, and then all of these things happened. 1665, Mar Gregorios, a Jacobite bishop from Jerusalem, comes to Kerala. And he gives the group that is under Archdeacon Thomas de Campo, the Antiochian liturgy and also the valid bishophood.
Oh, this is the Jalil Baba from
I believe,
Syria.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I mean, even then, actually, he didn't give bishop. He only gave the liturgy. So the new group has liturgical tradition, the Antiochian liturgical traditions now. And then they still they get valid bishops later on. Yeah,
That's important because that is the start of
Yeah.
the Antiochian
right.
rite itself coming
Right,
into
in India. Yeah.
in India.
Until then, there was the Antiochian rite did not exist in India, but it's like, as Saint Augustine would say, happy fault. We kind of lost the East Syrian tradition that was in India, but we gained the oldest tradition or rite, which is the Antiochian tradition, because it has the Saint James liturgy, Jacobin anaphora. So yeah, it's like you gave up the faith that they've known, but they got the even more ancient faith because the church started in Antioch with Peter being there, and then everything else after that.
Cool.
Yeah. So after that, it was the new group. It split into different things, but we can go into that a little bit later, I would think, unless you want me to go into it now. Just
Well,
it's a bit in a very short version.
yeah, I don't think we really do need to dwell into all of the intricacies of because like you see on the timeline, it becomes very branch.
Yes.
For a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
Right. And we could sit here and probably talk hours upon hours of exactly what each of those actions were, what those years represent, and why, who is right and who is wrong. I think it's interesting, like we talked about the 12 priests, right? It's like 12 priests making a bishop. It's interesting because it brought me back to there's a Dragon Ball Z episode where they try to do that as well, where like eight Super Saiyans come together and make a bigger Super Saiyan. So it's very funny, but to me it brings in the idea of just how important the idea of like understanding the laws and the decrees, what those exactly represent, and why especially just the idea of hierarchy is important to the faith. I think for us, especially youth, it becomes a little bit of like an afterthought, like we have an ushering here, we have a bishop here, and what's the importance of having them? But what do they exactly represent? We see it in history, but trying to translate that over here to understanding how does that affect my own personal life is a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, even in AD 110, Bishop Ignatius of Antioch had written, where there is a bishop, there is a church. And the people in India, in Kerala, knew that even at this time, that without having a valid bishop, the church does not have any authority. And it's not even a church because it's just a group of people. Without the apostolic succession, without a bishop with valid ordination in that apostolic succession, the church really doesn't exist in that locality. So they knew that. That's why they wanted the bishop. So yeah, they were going to any ends to get it.
I mean, that was very informative. I think I learned a lot more nuances in that because in what we read in, I think it was 11th grade, we did run through the history of this, and it's not as dense per se. I mean, it was dense for the chapter that we were reading, but you have done a great job putting everything into context that we had a hard time trying to find from different places. But I think this is a good summary of where, how the struggles we had, and honestly, what we'll see in the future, because from this point onwards, we start, as you guys said, you start to see a lot of branching and a lot of conflicts. A little bit in different areas of the branches, theology kind of changes of the thing, and so it's great to know that we at least had a good recollection of what happened in the past.
Yeah. I think now would be a good time to talk about specifically the Syro Malankara Catholic Church, right? And
of course, came to be.
Exactly.
How we came to be.
To kind of start off in that point. But it's interesting because we can't necessarily talk about that without talking about where we came from to a degree, right? Because we did come from one of the branches, right? Jerry Uchin, if you want to kind of talk about that.
Yeah, if it is possible, can we pull up that diagram that we had before?
Yes.
Just so people can follow along better.
Yeah, so
that would be good. So again, right now, I just want to situate ourselves while that diagram is being pulled up. We have basically three groups of Catholics in in Kerala, in India at this time. Okay, we are in like 17th century. We have the East Syriac Rite using people who are known as the old group, but the problem is their liturgy is now Latinized at this point of time. We have the split off group, which is called the new group, who don't really have a bishop, but they get valid ordination later on. Then we have the Latin Rite Catholic itself. So basically the Catholics who were there, who said, you know what, forget all of this fights and stuff, we are just going to join you guys. And they went with the missionaries, the Roman Rite missionaries who were there. So those are the three groups that are present at this time in India. So if it is, so now what happens is that the splitting becomes even more, what's the word? Clear. It becomes, it becomes much more distinct. So now we have the old group, they're going to stay as they are, and they, formally becomes known as the Syro Malabar Church. Then we have the new group. This is where all the splits are going to come up. So the new group, we had to remember that we got the Antiochian liturgy from a Jacobite bishop. So that new group is now under the Jacobite patriarch. The rule of the land was that the Jacobite patriarch will take care of the spiritual things. The archdeacon in India will take care of the temporal things. This was understood. As time went on, the Jacobite patriarch in Antioch wanted also the temporal things, so the land, the money, things like that. He wanted control over it. And some of the people in that new group said, you know what, no, that's not going to happen. And the church split. So now we have the Jacobite church that split from the new group, who is directly under the Jacobite patriarch in Antioch. We have the new church, which is what came to be known as the Orthodox Syrian Church, who is an autonomous church by itself. Both have the same exact liturgy, Antiochian liturgy. Okay. Now, this Orthodox Church, gets the Maphrianite in 1912, but they want to reunite with the Catholic Church. That attempt to reunite with the Catholic Church has been there since 1653, since the Bent Cross Oath. In 1926, this Orthodox Church, they convene a synod called the Parimala Synod, and they gave this Bishop Mar Ivanios, the authority to start the reunion talks with Rome, see how they can reunite with the Catholic Church. By 1929, there is pretty much an agreement between Rome and Mar Ivanios about reuniting. Everything is ready to go. But at this time, one Orthodox Church, they win a case against the Jacobite Church. And two, Rome said, we are not going to recognize the Catholicate and the Synod that is in India right now. Okay. And the bishops, the Synod at that time, they took offense at that and they went back. But Mar Ivanios said, I have seen the truth and I cannot, unsee it. I cannot ignore it. So him, along with 4 other people, 1 bishop, 1 priest, 1 seminarian, 1 deacon. And so it's basically 2 bishops total, 1 priest, 1 deacon, and 1 layman. The 5 people reunited with the Catholic Church on September 20, 1930. So from the new group, now a faction has reunited with the Catholic Church. That becomes the Syro Malankara Catholic Church. So that's where our history in India as a Syro Malankara Catholic Church with Antiochian liturgy begins. So while we trace the roots, go all the way back to AD 52, it's also new in a certain sense from 1930 onwards.
I think it's so important for us to kind of like look back. I think one of the specific things that I held on to in that speech that you had just said, Achin, was specifically on the idea that the Orthodox Church had at that point planned to see what the feasibility basically of joining with the Catholic Church would be like.
Right.
And so this, I think a lot of times there's a little bit of a miscommunication, especially when I talk to some of like the older generation Orthodox like parents and things like that, where it's like, oh, you guys left us. And it's well, how did it's like, how did that even start? Like, how did that conversation even start? It's it's like you said, it was a synod. It was the bishops coming together and deciding, hey, this was a decision that we should come and make, and let's see what happens.
Right.
And so I think that's a beautiful thing to look back and reflect upon.
It was the Orthodox bishops who started the whole conversation on that, on reuniting it. And I believe it was the 5th or 6th attempt throughout the centuries, major attempts to reunite, and this is the one that succeeded.
Have we had any other major events like that since from the Orthodox Church?
No. Since then, they've been more focused on, the issues with the Jacobite Church. So, we don't have to go into that right now.
And Acha, you mentioned there was a case that we read about also in a catechesis in our Sunday school lessons.
It's called the Vattipana case. Basically, while these 2 churches were together, a certain amount was deposited in the bank. We are talking hundreds of years ago before the split. And the case was about who gets the interest from that deposit that was made in the bank, that was deposited in the bank. And that's, all the churches and everything, it kind of relied on that interest, on that money that was there. So it was, a big amount of money. So that's what the case was about. And, it was ongoing. And then not recently, a couple of years ago, there has been a resolution to that. But that's winning that case at that time was what made the Orthodox Syrian Church go back from the reunion movement, along with Rome not recognizing the hierarchy that was present at the time in the Orthodox Syrian Church. Basically, Rome said, we had to examine this before we, actually accept it, acknowledge it, and approve of it.
That's a cool history, because at the same time we noticed that these sort of cycles of maybe monetary wise, maybe a little disturbances here and there cause
human interest,
maybe human interest, and it caused a divergence from what we're seeking. So it's like we were seeking the truth. We were seeking universality. We were trying to come together.
Right.
At the same time, there was a small, like a lack of attention to that at some point, and that caused, I think, a big moment in history to happen. Actually, like that, there were supposed to be more people. Essentially, there were supposed to be more, and that essentially did not happen. It's a little saddening to see.
Very much, yeah. And it's also one of the things that we have to keep in mind too. Just as a regular Catholic, or even as a Christian, that anything that detracts our faith from our primary focus of Christ can ruin the whole thing. Again, speaking very generally, if I hold that, for example, if I say that good works is important, but then I make that as my God, then my faith in God will change, because my actions become my God. Me wanting to help people become my God. Why am I helping people? It's because God gave me that mandate. God gave me those gifts to help people with. If I lose that focus, that connection, that primacy of God, then we become an idol even of good things. So that's one thing that we have to be very careful of in faith. Even, sometimes prayer can become an idol. Some people will say, I have to get certain number of devotions in a day. And in doing that, they might break their relationship with the people around them. They might ignore the good that they should be doing. That kind of getting devotions done become their God, their idol over, the one true God. So, yeah.
And our reunion is when we had that, we accepted that, we wanted something greater. We wanted something more wholesome, right?
Yeah, and, as Ivanios said, I have seen the truth and I cannot unsee it. So, I am the way, the truth, and the life. It's Jesus.
Yeah.
God.
The truth set him free. And indeed, he's, exactly. So I'm very much in gratitude to them, the 5 people, and our history informing us to be where we are right now. I mean, we're now up to 500,000, so 5 lakhs. So that's I think we're in comparison with the number, at least population, with the Jacobite Church, I believe.
No, they're much more, I would think.
Okay.
They're much more. Yeah.
Okay.
We are still a very small minority, even in the Catholic community, which is okay.
Yeah, that's true. We have many the churches within the rights of the churches within the Catholic Church. I think that's something that we could talk about perhaps, and where we situate ourselves within the Catholic Church. And but that's.
And just to clarify one more thing, I noticed this look of hesitation or doubt on Aaron's face when I talk about the acts of devotion becoming God. So basically, what I'm saying is, when our prayer life becomes just about getting certain number of devotions done, rather than doing it because of the love toward God, love for God, then it becomes an idol. What I'm saying, what I'm doing then is that I'm trying to earn my place with God, my relationship with God, rather than trusting God and knowing that God is always loving, always compassionate and accepting. He's my Father. I don't have to do certain things to get His love.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear to our audience that they don't go to their moms right after this podcast and go, "Mommy, you're praying too much. You need to stop. You're praying against your God now." That's not what we're saying.
It's not about quantity. It's about quality. That's what you have to keep in mind. Quality prayer, not quantity of prayer.
Exactly.
Yeah, I see that in making up prayers after, if you miss a prayer today, like a Hail Mary today, and you try to make it up there, in terms of counting that's not the right mindset. So you had to re-examine where your faith is coming from and let it just be.
It actually borders on another heresy called Jansenism, which basically is doing certain things to get our way into heaven, which is a heresy in the Catholic faith. You can't do that.
Although it is misconceived by the public that we are generally a tradition only, work oriented Christians, right? Which it is not the truth. No. If you read the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and if you read a lot of the Vatican documents that have been released, I think in the 70s and it's under John Paul, St. John Paul II, and many bodies of work that talks about our stance. We're trying to clarify the misconceptions that people have of the Catholic faith, and if people did some due diligence on that, reading the history or examining what the Catholic Church is teaching, actually a lot of people will be more Catholic than they think. Actually, so
basically our work should flow from the faith. I mean, if we have faith in God, the works will flow. it's complementary. It's not, just faith or just works. That's not
Yeah.
how.
It's justified.
Catholic
The works are
Church-
justification.
Yeah.
So justification is something that Catholic Church preaches about, especially in the book of
James.
Saint James. Yeah,
James.
exactly. James talks about this in depth, and even though Paul is used some way to negate what the Catholic Church teaches, even though he makes many claims in many portions. And
So just to clarify that,
Romans,
Saint Paul doesn't negate it, but people use Saint Paul to say that he negates what.
Yeah, exactly. The people use it to negate it, but which is not true.
He doesn't.
He doesn't. He actually agrees a lot with James on this matter. Exactly, and he does.
It's actually very clear when we look at the last judgment. I believe it is in Matthew chapter 25. When the people are separated to the right and to the left, Jesus does not ask, how long did you pray? He asked, did you clothe the naked? Did you visit the sick?
Yes.
Did you feed those who are hungry? Those are acts. And those acts are, something that follows from your faith in God. So you cannot separate faith and works. It always goes together. It has to go together.
It has to go together.
Yeah.
Right.
Very
Yeah,
good.
I think we've talked a lot about the present aspect of it.
Yeah.
I want to bring us back. I want to wrangle this conversation back into the history aspect as well, because I think we haven't talked enough, especially about Ivanios himself, right? About him, about his story, of how, like we talked about, he was tasked with finding out exactly how that reunification aspect could work, and at the end of it, he made a decision, even without the whole church backing behind him, to go forward with it. When I look at it, I think of him and his own life and it's his importance to our church history. But I think the other aspect that I think about is how I feel as a Malankara Catholic currently. It's interesting because Kason and I have had this conversation previously before, how when we have conversations as a Catholic and trying to like understand our place within the Catholic family, it's interesting because we are surrounded by so many Latin rites around us. And so I want to shift that question into the viewpoint of how it might have been addressed back then. And basically the question would be kind of, did we ever have to transition to any of the teachings of the Catholic Church? How did that fitting in take place? Did it fit like a glove, or was it very much a harsh reality that our forefathers had to go into?
Very good question. So basically, the people knew the faith, and because of that, they knew the main aspects, the main dogmas and everything like that. Now, the problem came that, there were, of course, these influences of the Protestants at that time, especially after the Dutch came into governance, and then the British. So, of course, the influence of the Protestants. And the Antiochian liturgy was used by the Jacobites, who were monophysites. So they only believed in one nature of God, even though the liturgy itself is Catholic. It precedes the Jacobite faction. So at the time of reunion, one of the things that the Malankara Catholic Church had to do was make sure that any confusion would be taken care of. There might be some language that can be interpreted as heretical. Those would have to be cleared up. So there weren't that much, because like I said, from the beginning, you are using terms like Mother of God, which goes against, Nestorian heresy. You're addressing Jesus as God, which goes against the monophysite heresy. So all of that kind of made sure that there were no heresies formally held or taught by the Syro Malankara Catholic Church, but Rome was pretty much being careful and saying that, just make sure that there's nothing there that can be even interpreted as heresy. So there were some changes maybe in the language that had to be made, but other than that, it was a smooth transition, more or less.
Yeah, the way that I kind of look at it is like, I remember when I had to explain myself. That's a weird way to put it, like explain myself, but kind of explain what the church, the Malankara Catholic Church is in reference to the church as a whole. Right. And the way that I had to like explain it, like in kind of history wise, was saying, oh, when we had the reunion movement, we got to keep all of our traditions, just made sure that everything was Catholic in the end. Right. And that's a simplification of exactly what that process was really identifying if there are any kind of heretical material, and then making sure that that any ideas or any teachings were not against the church. Yeah,
I mean, one of the clearest ways we can find that or see that is even now, the Jacobite liturgy, the Orthodox liturgy, and the liturgy that we use, 99.9% similar. The only major difference is that they don't say the name of Pope Francis, but they still recognize like the what do you call it, the Rish Patriarch is the head patriarch,
Yeah.
which is the Bishop of Rome. So
Mhm.
again, faith-wise, there's not much different, even in our liturgy. Even though they call themselves Jacobite, the other people call themselves Orthodox, we call ourselves Catholic. Even then, we are still using the same liturgy without that much
Mhm.
modification. So yeah,
That's something very beautiful to see. At the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
time, very saddening too. Like that
Very much so,
differences
yeah.
are there.
Yeah.
And I always wondered as a kid, when can we all come together? Like,
Right,
it's like,
yeah.
when can we all come together? It's something I asked myself when I was a kid. I was like, oh, why do we go to when no, mom's side is more like Orthodox, and my dad's
Yeah.
side, my Apachin reunited with the Catholic Church,
Mhm.
and we noticed some differences because I did attend like in some parts of the Orthodox Church before, and
Yeah.
I've seen that there's a lot of similarity. I love the hymns, I love the tradition, I love the love that they have. It's amazing, and
Yeah.
I wish, I hope, and I pray I do still today that we could come together, sort
Yeah.
out our differences, believe
Celebrate it on
more
one
that
day,
unite us.
yes.
Yeah, exactly,
what,
exactly.
Our Catholicos major Archbishop Clemes, he had mentioned, I will resign my position if all of you, if the Jacobite and the Orthodox, if we come together as Catholic Church, you can have the title, I don't care.
Wow.
So this,
Yeah.
that's how much he decides it. That's how much pretty much everyone decides it. But again, it's that human interest that kind of stops it.
Yeah.
That's what kind of hinders that reunification too.
I think, yeah, and there's a lot of animosity that formed between groups,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like some things regarding funerals, where to bury, like
Right, yeah.
these are issues that kind of I'm very sad about, and it talks about in like Mathew about leaving our something our opposition of our enemies at the altar, like
Right.
before we receive the Christ,
Yeah.
before we
Before you offer the sacrifice, go
before you offer the
reconcile with your
sacrifice.
enemy. Yeah.
Exactly. So we have to do that, and we have to come together. And
Yes.
I think that sort of stage, I hope, is in the near future. I really do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I was actually baptized Orthodox. So
Wow.
yeah. My
Another
dad was
part of your
Orthodox
story.
before he reunited with the Catholic Church.
Okay.
Yeah. So all of us have that connection in us,
Yes.
so in one way or
Yeah.
another.
Yes.
I think that this really does highlight the importance of especially us being able to share this with
Mhm.
anyone, everyone who's hearing this.
Yeah.
I hope that we're able to kind of inspire the people who are listening to continue having these kinds of conversations
Right.
with people around you, right?
Yeah.
Fellow
Yes.
Catholics, Orthodox, Jacobite, whoever it may be.
Right.
Having these conversations of understanding what our history is, and really knowing that we're not as different as some people might say we are.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Especially like trying to understand, like because I've talked about this with some of my friends as well, who are Catholic and non-Catholic, just the idea that of course not during your regular Sundays when you have to go to your
Mhm.
Catholic church, but maybe sometime on a weekday, if you're interested, it might be a good thing to go check out some of these other churches to see exactly and follow along and understand, wow, like that's the exact same thing that I say, except
Exactly. Yeah.
they do it in a little different way, and that's interesting, right? It's the traditions and the way that we do these things are important for a reason, and and that's what connects us at the end of it.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. It's very great to see that. I mean, thank you. That was well put, Aaron. I think we have to encourage ecumenism amongst our peers, amongst our friends. I had a lot of Orthodox. I have a lot of Orthodox friends. My friends. It's like a Roman Catholic. There's a variety in our pool of people that we know, or variety in our contacts,
Mhm.
and go. When you have ecumenical events at different cities and all that, go and learn about it. At the same time, know where we come from, where we stand as well. So it's a good thing to see. Yeah.
Mhm.
Achin, right now where we're at as like a Malankara Catholic Church, are we when compared to some of the other churches, the other
Mhm.
rites, are we? I know that we've said that we're like relatively new, right? Later 1900s, but
Mhm.
on the general aspect, when compared to some of the other rites, are we getting a little bit bigger than some of the other ones? Are there rites that are smaller than us? How are we?
In terms of population, we are definitely growing fast. In fact, Pope John Paul II, Saint Pope John Paul II, he said we are one of the fastest growing churches in the world. In terms of status, we are already at a patriarchal status because we have what's called the Catholicos, or major Archbishop Catholicos, and it is at the same status as a patriarchal church, but without the title of a patriarch. So
Okay.
that's the main distinction. I believe the title patriarch itself is not part of our the Malankara tradition, so that's part of it. But yeah, major archbishop status for Catholicos, it's the same as any other major archbishop, around the world. So we are at the same status as the older, much more ancient Syro Malankara Church.
This is what the Code of Canons for the Oriental Church is referred to
Mhm.
for this. Is it like for the patriarchs and why we have major archbishop?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So I mean, I have a code. I'll have to find it. But yeah, it's basically saying that our status is that of a major archiepiscopal church, but without the title of a patriarchal church. Same rights,
Okay.
same privileges as a patriarchal church, but without the title.
Now, is there,
Oh.
I guess, a higher level that we could eventually ascend to, or is this more like where
I think this would be the highest, because we already have sui juris status. It is our synod that elects a new bishop. We only have to inform Rome about it. We don't need Rome to elect a new bishop for us.
Yeah, so there's
Okay,
that sense of
okay.
autonomy and decision
Right, it's
making
very
as
much
well.
there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that helps in kind of understanding exactly, even though we are newer in
new,
terms of
yeah.
history,
Yeah.
we've grown and we've been able to adapt to a degree as well and evolve
Mhm.
to a position where we're continuing to spread our faith and
Yeah.
and grow as a church as a whole. So
Yeah.
This is the love I have for the church. It's because we have that liberty to have that sort of autonomy to make decisions, appoint bishops, all that. It's great because we're pretty close, especially in Kerala. They are close with the people that they know. They could elect bishops, they could have priests, and it's nice to see because whenever you go in different parts of the different churches of the Catholic Church and the rites of the Catholic Church, you see that autonomy there too, and
Yeah.
it's very encompassing, but at the same time very unified. That's different but unique. It's like
Right.
it's nice to see that. It's like unity and diversity, right? That's
Exactly,
that
yeah.
concept. Exactly. So I love seeing that, and that makes us very unique in that sense. So love it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of autonomy, I think this would be a very good time for us to go back and basically say goodbye to the country of India, because I think just looking back at our history, we really do just focus on the history of India itself. But the reality of the matter is that our church is a global church. The Malankara Catholic Church is a global church. That we are not just located in India now that we have members located in so many different countries. I don't know the exact numbers of that, but specifically what I really want to focus on is the USA.
Yeah.
And for me, it's interesting because, for my reality of understanding the Malankara Catholic Church as a whole, I think is predominantly, and I don't think there's many experience that I've really had growing in India itself. I have some recollection of, for example, my older brother receiving Holy Communion in India. But in terms of like my foundational events, specifically like my own Holy Communion, me entering into like being an altar boy, an altar server, things like that. A lot of those foundational events were here in the US. And a lot of my core memories and my own journey into growing in faith was in the US.
Yeah.
So I think, especially having you here, Jerry Etchen, I think it'd be a really good question for me to personally ask. How did we start in the US? Because I don't know.
So in order to understand the history of Syro Malankara Church in the US, we have to go back a little bit farther to understand the laws of USA at the time. So basically, this is a very staggering number, but between the years of 1820 and 1920, in the US, guess how many Indian immigrants were there? Between 1820 and 1920. Guess how many?
1820.
1820 and 1920.
Wow. Maybe
Great question.
1,000.
Okay, so there were 7,491. Okay.
Okay.
Now,
Wow.
that was because there was a law in the US that had what's called the National Origins Formula, which prevented many migrants from Southern and Eastern Europe and also many ethnic groups from Asia to come into US. In 1965, this Immigration and Nationality Act in 1965 removed that clause, which meant that now anybody from anywhere can come to India or come to US, and that led to an increase in immigration of Indians from late 1960s onwards.
Okay.
So now we are talking about many more skilled workers coming in, health professionals coming in, nurses coming in. They are all coming in, which meant they bring their faith with them. So from late 1960s to the 70s, we see, Jacobite, Orthodox, Malankara Catholics, Marthoma, everyone from India coming to US. None of them have their own established churches or anything like that, so they all worship together. Especially the Roman Rite Malayalis, or people from Kerala, the Syro Malabar people and the Syro Malankara people, they form, Catholic fellowships wherever they are. And whenever any priest, Roman Rite priest or Syro Malabar priest or Syro Malankara priest come, they get him and celebrate the mass in that priest's rite, and all of them come together. As immigration increased, as it further increased, each had enough to have their own priest, their own facilities, their own, kind of establishments, and they began to bring their own priests. So for us, the churches started in 1981 in New York, 1982 in Dallas, I believe, and 1983 in Chicago. So those were the three major missions. Sorry, 1982 was Philadelphia. So 1981 New York, 1982 Philadelphia, 1983 in Chicago. These were the three major communities, Syro Malankara communities that were there. In 1984, Bishop Mar Gregorios came and officially inaugurated the Malankara Catholic Mission of North America. So basically, it was one mission with different, missions in different parts of the country. So we had New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Dallas, Houston, I don't think was present at that time. And so we started as Malankara Catholic Mission in 1984. Time and on, we started new missions. In 2001, we got what's called an apostolic visitator. So basically, it's a bishop who answers directly to the Pope, who is established here. So it was Mark Leamis, our current Catholicos. He was appointed as the apostolic visitator. He oversaw US and Canada missions. And then after him, Bishop Mar Thomas came. After that, in 2010, we were elevated as an exarchate. 5 years later, we were elevated further as an eparchy. So since 2015 onwards, we have been an eparchy. So our history as an eparchy or as a diocese is only 9 years old, which is why we are doing all of this, translations and things like that to give the framework for the future of this eparchy, of this diocese.
So yeah, the way that you've explained this, Sachin, it's very interesting because like we talked about when we talked about the history of India previously, it's the rapid succession of growth.
Yeah.
Is there, I guess, when we were doing this, was there any kind of template or understanding of how to do this?
Yeah, of course. Growing? Many other Eastern churches in the US went through the same path. But, as far as I know from my very limited research, I don't think any of the exarchates have become an eparchy in that short of a time, in 5 years. So, and that's mainly due to, Bishop Thomas Murray Eusebius and the priests who were there, their hard work, to do all that is needed to elevate an exarchate to an eparchy. And that's no easy task. So, yeah, so thank God we are here at this point.
Absolutely. I
think interestingly enough, I was the first priest ordained after we became an eparchy. Bishop Father Michael Adathil is the first priest after we became an exarchate. 2013 he was ordained. We became an eparchy in 2015. I was ordained in 2016. So
literally writing the history books right here.
Writing history books, literally.
Just a footnote.
This is going to be when 2100, 2200, someone reads this. The first one.
Nobody's going to care. They only look at who's the first priest from US. That's Father Michael.
Oh, that's a good one. We'll make sure we'll write it into history.
Yeah,
We'll try our best.
Exactly. It really does make me think, especially like when we talk about our rapid growth, we talked about the relationship that that this rapid growth is when compared to some of the other Eastern rites.
Mhm.
So in that context, of course, we talk about the Malankara Catholic Church. We've talked about the Malabar Catholic Church, right?
Mhm.
And their history as well. In terms of, I guess, our relationship with them, we talked about in the early church, the Malankara Church here in the U.S., how
Mhm.
we would gather together, mixed denomination basically,
Yeah.
and then grow in our
Right.
faith. How is that? I guess my question would be like, how has that impacted our relationship between some of our different churches here?
I think
Has
one of the main ways in which we can see the relationship is by looking at all the ecumenical councils that exist wherever especially the major areas like New York, Chicago, Philadelphia. All of these have very strong ecumenical councils and ecumenical programs. So that show that relationship, that love and consideration for others is still there. It's an ongoing thing. So that's not forgotten. The common struggles that they went through as fellow Malayalis, as fellow Keralites, they haven't forgotten that. It's still there. So yeah, as of now, that consideration is still there, and I'm thinking it will continue. We'll see.
You'll definitely. I mean, that's
Yeah.
we pray to God that definitely. I mean, you get like invited to. I know
Oh, yeah.
the Syro Malabar.
Oh no,
headquarters,
our
the
relationship with
Parkes-
Syro Malabar is very,
Yeah.
very close. It's very
Amazing,
close.
yeah.
I'm talking about like other denominations, like even like
other denominations,
Orthodox Church, Orthodox Church,
Yeah.
Jacobite Church,
Yeah.
Even there we have a very, very close connection because of our
Yes.
the shared history, shared struggles, all of that.
So
Right.
it's funny because you talk about the ecumenical churches. For me, it's I remember when I was young and I couldn't really understand what the ecumenical church is. So ours is called ICCH. It's the Indian Christian Ecumenical Churches of Houston. And
Oh,
so it
Oh.
belongs to a bunch of different churches, right? And
Yeah.
and of course, some of these churches, there's multiple churches, right?
Mhm.
St. Joseph has, or the Malabar churches have 2 here,
Yeah.
and then of course Orthodox has like 2 or 3. And so it's interesting where we come together because when I was younger, what I thought that really meant, what ICGH meant was we come together for Christmas. Because every single year we would do like a Christmas program where each of the churches would
Yes.
do like a little program, or they would like sing songs, or they would like do a little skit. And I didn't
Yeah.
really understand it. But now it's as I get older, I really do understand like the idea of ecumenicalism is the strong bonds that we have that kind of
Right.
connect us
Mhm.
together, right?
Yeah.
And it's
in the
not
common
just
faith in Jesus Christ,
exactly, and
while
that
each
faith,
maintains its own identity. Yeah.
exactly, and it's
Yeah.
not just from the idea of just believing in Christ, but it's also a story of the journey itself
Right.
of each of these cities, how
Mhm.
their churches have grown and how they've understood that these relationships are important for them to
Mhm.
continue existing here in the US
Yeah.
as well.
Right.
Definitely.
I mean, those bonds are like very, very rooted. And I have my dad has friends of many areas, and I'm just shocked by there's so many, because he came here in the 2000s, and he didn't have anyone, but the church community is what gave him the love, he could go to Kurbana and all that. It really came from his friends that was there. So I think it's a great thing to see that even of different backgrounds, they all come together for the common struggle that they
Right.
face. I think we see that again when we look into the past a little bit of where we have, in the past we see difficulties, issues. They hold hands together when that
Right.
comes, and history repeats itself in different ways, in
Yes.
newer ways. So I think we're just living through another phase of that. So I
Yeah.
think yeah. So
Yeah, I now I really want to like ask more on the idea of, we've talked about the church in India and we've talked about the church here in the US. What exactly now is our relationship with the Malankara Catholic Church back in India? Like, do we kind of have a lot more autonomy now that we're here? Is the idea of the aspect that we have books, for example, that you are creating, right?
Mhm.
How do are they independent from the church back home? Do we share those books? How does that relationship look
Right.
like?
So first of all, we don't want to be independent from the
Yeah.
hierarchy.
True. Absolutely
That's
true.
bad. That's really bad.
Absolutely true.
So basically, our relationship is that we remain as Syro Malankara Catholics, but adapting to the North American culture, in the US and in Canada. So what does that look like? That looks like modified catechism textbooks. It looks like translated liturgical books. it looks like, different formation for the people who are here as, priests, because the formation that is given in India for priests is not the same as what you need here in the US, for example, because in India, people don't have an 8 to 5 job. It's more free. A priest can go to visit a family pretty much at any time if the family is willing. Here in the US, a priest can only go if the family is free, if they are not working, and if they, are open to the priest coming. So it's nobody's fault, but that's a culture, So those are the areas where things are different. But again, we rely on the hierarchy in India for everything, including priests, because we only have 3 priests from our eparchy. There's Michael Achan and Jovan Achan and myself. That's it. And we have 25 different parishes and missions. So all these priests are coming from US, thanks to the bishops in US. And all our, continued formation stuff, like all the Malayalam books, it's still coming from India. So we need that connection, of course, and we have to maintain that connection, that patrimony with India. But again, there will be some things different, like language, like formation, things like that.
I mean, a quick question on that in terms of maintaining that in the long run, especially when attitudes change here, things like, culture changes, people's relationship with the church, varies here and there. And the language, or a person, if they know Malayalam, they're much more likely to have contact with their home culture and in Kerala, right?
Yeah,
Here, I mean, we see a higher number of English speakers and less of a Malayalam speaking community. So how do we maintain that connection? If you any advice, any sort of hope that you have per se for that, like in terms of youth or in terms of the adults, or how could they do it? Yeah.
I think one of the couple of main things that we are already doing is, when we go to India with our parents, we usually go and see the bishop of the eparchy or diocese that we are in. That itself gives a connection to, our younger generation, that, there's something there. There's somebody that we honor, or that we respect, that we look up to when we go there. And that's our spiritual father, So that connection is there. And 2, when the bishops from US or from India come here, they also visit our families. So that connection, at least until now, it's there, and it has to be maintained. Now, I don't think language is going to be an issue, because, bishops and priests coming from India, they are well trained in English. It's just a matter of accent. Only the accent differs, but, everything else is fine. And also going forward, one of the ways we can keep that connection is by realizing that our motherland in terms of faith is still Kerala. Not just us, but also Syro Malankara Catholics. All our forefathers, all the struggles that they went through to keep the faith happened in Kerala. So it's going to sound so bad, but it's kind of like our holy land.
Yeah. It is it's our background. Exactly. That is our
so it's like,
home base.
we consider Israel and Palestine as holy land because our, Jesus, our God, walked there. We don't have any material connection to it. It's a spiritual connection, just like that. Kerala is where our forefathers walked and struggled and even died for the faith.
Right.
So it's kind of our secondary holy land.
I mean, it's more, do you think, especially the younger ones, we're youth asking you this, right? Like, what can we do to just have that heightened sense of excitement to maybe go back and visit? I mean, I know it can get dull for some people, but I truly enjoy India, and I love Kerala, and a lot of my family and everything, the nature, the ambience, the love, the faith, it's just very vibrant there. How can we do that for the youth here? Like, what is some of your recommendations, especially?
I want to add to this before Achan, you answer this. So when I was younger, a big way that I thought about the faith was the idea that I needed to know Malayalam to really know my faith, right? I feel like we are evolving, right, through your help as well, in understanding that the Malankara faith, it goes beyond any kind of language, right? That language is a way to for us to understand it. Now, when we look at the younger generation, especially like Kason has taught, we are seeing more youth who only have a very one-dimensional relationship with their church, just like me and church, and that's it. And then there's no idea of the community, of understanding our history, of understanding any more of it, because for some of them, it's because of the fact that they've also used the language of just using English as that crutch, and they just see it in that one dimension. and they don't see the idea of maybe going to India and understanding like the history behind it as an importance. So
Yeah.
add along with that as well, how do we make that an important thing?
But one of the things we had to remember is that it's not just about language, because again, the Syro Malankara liturgy, as the language states, it wasn't always in Malayalam or in English, it was in Syriac, and it was in West Syriac. So our forefathers did not even know sometimes what they were saying because they were using Syriac. They knew, they had a vague idea of the exact meanings, but it's not just about language. That's where, in order to understand who we are now, we have to look at where we came from. So we have to know the history in order to be rooted and to understand who we are, because, anywhere a Syro Malankara Catholic kid would go, he would be seen as an Indian. But if he doesn't know anything about India, anything about his past, what makes him an Indian, then he's going to have an identity crisis. And that's something that happens a lot among our teenagers. Because if you ask them, are you Indian? Yeah, they look like an Indian, but they don't know anything about India. Are you an American? Well, they live in America, but, they don't have any features of an American. So that identity crisis comes. That's why, each of us, whether you're Indian or whatever you are, go back and look at where you came from, what the good aspects of that culture, of that land are, and incorporate those good aspects and also the aspects of where you are living right now.
Okay.
So that way you actually have an advantage, the good qualities of being an Indian and the good qualities of being an American. So that's how you become a good Indian American. And many times we focus on one or the other so much that, we kind of exclude ourselves from integrating into the community. But when you have the good of both cultures, you have more to contribute to the culture that you're living in.
You're right about that. When we're even sharing like a traditional dish that we make with our neighbors, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
that, we explain what's in it, tengapa and all that stuff. It's like, oh, this is, you add that in. I'm like, okay. So that's what we use. Common Indian dishes use that. I mean, and it fosters a conversation. We could bring something to a potluck. We could bring something to the table, right?
Of course, yeah.
Not only physically with food, but with something, with our culture, with our identity.
Right,
and people love hearing it too. I shared where I came from. I'm like, oh wow, they've only heard about it, but once we explain, and especially when I tell them I'm a Christian and I'm Catholic, and they're like, oh wow, you are. I'm like, tell me more about the faith there. And we run down all the history that we just talked about in a brief 2 minutes, and there we go. And I had so many early instances where it was through those conversations I forged so many bonds, actually. So,
we just have to look at the good of both cultures.
Some
good things in one culture is missing in another culture. Punctuality is an amazing thing of the American culture, not so much in India. But respect of elders is huge in India, but it's not as specified or as much emphasized in the US. So it's different levels of emphasizing different values. So when we bring the goodness of both cultures together, then we have much more to contribute to the place that we are living in, and thus enriching the world around us.
Right. Exactly.
Adding a little bit of spice.
A little bit of spice. Yes.
Best way to put it. Yeah. I think this is, I'm surprised I haven't actually talked about this earlier, but Jerry Etchen, I think it'll be a good time for you right now to kind of share exactly what you do these days, what your role is within maybe your church, but then also greater throughout in the North America sector, what you exactly do, and then also into kind of describing some of the research that you've done as well in your studies.
Okay, so I'll start locally. So my official post is I'm the pastor of the Syro Malankara Catholic Church here in Chicago. I've been here for 2.5 years. I'm also the director of the youth movement of the eparchy, MCYM, Malankara Catholic Church, of which this podcast is a product. I'm also part of the Synodal Commission for the Youth of the Syro Malankara Catholic Church. It's a 15-member committee, and I'm privileged to be a member of that. In terms of personal work, one of my competence, I don't want to say expertise, one of my competence is that of translation. So over the last 2 years, I was able to publish the Holy Week prayers, the Book of Feast, the Divinity, which is the pastoral handbook of the priest, recently the Way of the Cross, and today I finished the English Daksa. So I still have more work to do, but the major ones are finished. And I'm also doing my doctorate in youth ministry. So yeah, not much.
Wow.
Just something small right at the end. Just the
Just a
doctorate.
small something. Yeah, exactly. A doctorate.
No,
All this history things and everything, when I wanted to like refresh my memory, I just had to look at the doctorate, the first chapter. So a section of that
Wow.
is history of the Malankara Catholic Church and history of the Malankara Catholic Church here in the US and Canada.
yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
we were really blessed by having you here to kind of talk about this,
Thank you.
especially.
Yeah.
I know we had talked about the growth of our church here in the US. I think it might also be very important, and in context wise, especially for us, I think it'd be a really good information for us to really understand as well. How was MCYM itself growing in the US? I know in a general sense, MCYM is always present in our churches, right?
Right.
It's a part of our church. Can you kind of
Yeah.
explain that and how that grew?
It grew with the church. That's basically the summary of it. So basically, as the youth became more present in the church, then there needed to be some kind of organization for the youth. And of course, we already had this in the Malankara Catholic tradition, MCYM, so we implemented that. And originally, it was organized in each of the missions. Then we started having a national board for the MCYM. I believe that started in 2001, if not a little bit earlier. And then after that, now we have active MCYM units in, I believe, 20 of the missions and parishes of US and Canada. We have a very active national board. We have the MCYM National Conference coming up in August 1 to 4.
Yep.
So all of that is, the preparations for that is happening. So yeah, it's something that is growing. Again, MCYM is at its infant stages in the US. We are still finding our foothold here. But with each passing year, we are getting better at being the youth wing of the Malankara Catholic Church in the US and Canada.
That's,
I mean,
yeah. Go ahead, Casey.
Oh. I mean, I think it's a great thing to see, because I seen, at least church-wise, to carry on to my, like the previous point that we talked about. I mean, we are San Jose, where I come from, is a mission, and we elevated to the level of a church or parish, really. Parish, yeah. And even though we don't have the numbers per se, the faith is pretty strong. I think kind of models of the early church in the United States, but in a smaller unit. And we see that there is that hunger for faith, wanting to involve ourselves in all the sacraments in the Malankara style. So that's something very nice to see, because I had my first communion here, and more things to come actually from here. So it's like a lot of things are kind of starting to settle around the United States and Canada. So in our eparchy here, and it's great to see. And I can see the mission perspective, at least as we go. And I see that Aaron brings his more of a larger church. Houston has like 120 20 families. We have like around 20 families, 25. And I love seeing, I mean, at least from my perspective, that hunger, even though our area tends to be very busy with a lot of jobs, a lot of that, we always make time for church and prayer and unity. Like, it's great to see. I really love my St. Jude family from there, and I love seeing that families and communities form in different areas, and new missions and churches having that sort of unity. It's just lovely to see. I wish it's more connected, because that's something that we have to do, especially since the United States is so large, with conferences, with how I met Aaron was through a regional conference that we had, and I still have the shirt, and it says Dallas, San Jose, or California, Texas, Florida on there. It was great to see. Like, I look at it like, wow, that's unity right there. And I wish more of that is spread throughout, and I pray to God that comes true, actually.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I just want to kind of put in my 2 cents on, like Hasten said, coming from a bigger church perspective, but also just like a personal perspective. Is just like the idea, like, I feel at this point in my life very curious about my church, right? Still wanting to learn so much more. And that's not just a curiosity on the education fact of the church, but it's also curiousness on on how my church is growing, right? To understand
Mhm.
where we've been, but also how we're growing, right? I love hearing news about our missions. I love hearing that,
Mhm.
like, oh, we added a member or two, we've had new families
Yes.
come in, we've started celebrating mass on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis. We have
Right.
like
Yeah.
a church, like that blows my mind, right? Because we are like we talked about, we're still such an infant church to a degree, but at the same time, we have such active youth members who want to connect, who want to continue to establish these kinds of relationships. And then the other aspect of it is I look out at the missions, but I also need to look inward at my own church as well, right?
Yeah.
We have a growing youth. We have a youth that's also hungry for knowledge, for the Lord, really in order to have a deeper connection with Him. And it makes me question, how can I continue to foster that kind of environment for them, right? Because you kind of setting the example can only go a long way if you don't provide the resources and the
Right.
pathways and the programs for them to be able to use. And so that's why I love going to conventions and conferences, things like that, because a big part of it is also sharing our stories, sharing our
Yeah.
experiences, sharing ideas, seeing what works, and just reflecting on that and understanding what can I get from that I can bring back home and share with the people around me.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also realizing that there are other people my age with the same background who are going through the same struggles and maybe even doubts that I'm going through, that
Mhm.
itself helps a lot in one's journey to faith.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I
definitely
agree.
go to conventions, go to conferences, go to leadership
Yeah.
retreats.
Talking about conventions, like I hear this from my mom because we came to the last one, and
Mhm.
she always tells me, "Case," and I felt very at home when I
Yeah,
was there, and I think everyone felt the same way. We all, as youth, felt the same way.
yeah,
Everyone was together in that small, the hotel, and we were just praising God together, having dinner, having that sort of unity. That's something that is worth going to, and it's worth your time. It's worth that because we are also reflecting and getting together and sharing in our love for each other. At the same time, we're setting up the future. We're setting
yeah.
up connections. We're setting up, people find their significant other sometimes.
Or realizing
Things,
their vocation to priesthood.
Or
exactly. It's
that.
like someone here in the call. So it's just it's lovely to see, and I also felt the same way. And I want more of that. I want more of a unity with our Malankara faith. I think when looking into our past, when we hear the arrival of Saint Thomas in India and everything, we see it's like a grand story. Like it's a frontier, right? It's like the Western. It's like a frontier. We don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
It's just unknown. But there's that drive, that will to expand, to grow, to have a faith that is, that we can't really measure.
Mhm.
And when we see that the growth of the church in the America, like when I look at when you talked about the history in the 2000s, like wow, that's like a and when hopefully when our kids and our future look back at us, they see it as a grand event, and history should keep writing for the Malankara
Exactly.
Church.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
beautiful. Yeah, thank you, Kason.
yeah, of course.
I feel like we've talked about a lot of different things in
Mhm.
this call, and I really
Yes.
do appreciate each of y'all taking your time. But before we do kind of wrap things up, I do want to ask kind of one last question, kind of end things off. It's more of a personal, like reflective question.
Mhm.
And basically it's this: what does the Malankara Church really bring to the table for you in context of the entire Catholic Church, right? The Catholic Church as a whole. What does that
Yeah.
to you look like?
Yeah, to add on to that, it's like, what does basically Malankara mean for you? Like,
Okay.
basically, yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
that's a hard question
yeah,
right there.
yeah.
What does Malankara mean? Wow. So basically, again, I think I would have to go back to that spirituality of Malankara Church. Why do I remain a Malankara Catholic rather than a Roman Rite Catholic, Coptic Catholic, whatever?
Hmm.
Um, and I think it has to do with the fact that, it has to do with the liturgy, the beauty of it. If we look at any single line of any liturgy, it doesn't matter how minor it is, how major it is, if it is a feast day or if it is a regular day, you take any single line of any liturgy, any song, whatever, you will see that it has at least one biblical reference to it.
Hmm.
Okay, so Bible is so imbued in the liturgy that you pray, 2 or 3 times or in 2 or 3 modes just by participating in the liturgy.
Hmm.
On top of that, we are very much, we are using a lot of symbolical language. the phrase is, making heaven present on earth during your Holy Kurbanos and during your liturgy. So that experience, once you experience it, you really can go back. And I think I had 2 very sad days in my life, and those were missing 2 Good Fridays because I was in Rome. Think of that. I was in Rome and I was missing Malankara Good Friday liturgy. And those were 2 of the saddest days of my life.
Wow.
So if once you experience that Malankara liturgy, once you understand the meaning of it, and then you miss it, it's terrible. It's like a giant loss. It's like you missed out on something huge and you can never make up for it, kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, that's part of what Malankara means to me, and also the fellowship. Again, not even as a priest, even as before I was even a seminarian, I could go to any Malankara church conference, convention, whatever, and go talk to any uncle or auntie, and they would treat me as their own son. Go talk to any of my peers, they would treat me as their own like friend or cousin or brother. So that kind of tight-knit relation, that kind of sharing of values, that also is a major part of being a Malankara for me. And on top of that, our relationship with our bishops, they're like our second fathers. We can go and talk to them as though with our own father. We can even get into like stubborn arguments with them, and they won't love us any less. And Aaron would be able to tell you his uncle, right, is a bishop. So
granduncle,
granduncle, So like that kind of, what other church can give you that kind of relationships, whether it is with bishops, whether it is with uncles and aunties, whether it is with your peers and people who are younger than you. That's kind of the richness that we have. So we got the faith aspect, you got the communal aspect, and together you are just blessed to be Malankara.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I
Thank
mean, you have a exactly. You have a perspective. You grew up from 13 onwards from here, and you see the development, and you have that longingness. I mean, I feel the same with longingness in terms of like missing Malankara math. I go to the Latin partly here because I'm in San Diego. 7-hour drive. I can't go to Malankara. We don't have a mission here. God wills, hopefully there's a mission here, or a future church. But until then, I feel Malankara is something that offers a lot for us. And maybe, Acha, you could maybe touch upon this, like for the message for the general church, like the Catholic Church. What do you say Malankara is? Like, what's your invitation to it? Like in terms of not just liturgically wise, but in terms of extending your hand outwards.
I think
we are,
in order to be a good Catholic, I think you should understand the diversity that is in the Catholic Church. And part of that is experiencing the different rites. If I am a Malankara Catholic and the only thing I know is Malankara Catholic, then that doesn't make me a good Catholic. It makes me a good Malankara. So I invite all the Catholics to go to as many Catholic liturgies, Catholic communities as you can, and get an exposure to it. Look at the richness that each of them brings to the table, and that's why we call it a Catholic communion.
Right.
We come together and we share that richness. But if we restrict ourselves to just what we know, just our traditions, then we won't get anywhere. We won't grow. So by getting more of a familiarity, more of a knowledge and awareness of the beauty and the truth that is around us, we will be more developed even as an individual, and we'll have more to contribute to the world around us, and we'll be better for it.
Awesome. That's very awesome.
You've summed that up perfectly, Achin. I think it's a great.
Holy Spirit is working extra hard on me today.
It is.
Absolutely. I think that was a great call to action for all of us. I know specifically in like each of our parishes, we may have like those experiences where we see someone new coming into our church, and we go, oh, hey, who's that person, right? And I think it's a call to action for us in our hearts to be able to go up to someone and be like, hey, are you new to our church? Is your first time here? Hey, welcome. Share them the book. Show them how it works. At the same time, inviting our fellow, either Malankarites, Latin Rite members, the people around us, or friends or family members, whoever may be, to go and visit and check out other churches. It's really an inspirational thing for us to kind of push ourselves and expand our, not just our knowledge of the Catholic Church and the faith, but the culture as well, right? We're such a diverse church. So
again, just my last 2 cents, that goes for all aspects of our life. The more we restrict ourselves to ourselves, the more narrow our world becomes. But the more you go outside of you, the more you reach out to others. Doesn't matter what they are. They could be, non-Catholic, atheist, whatever. The more you reach out to other people, the more of a better human you will be.
Okay.
And that's what Jesus has been telling you. How can you love an invisible God if you cannot love your brother?
No.
And by brother, he means the people around you. So maintain your connection with God, but with that connection, go out and reach out to others and serve others. Spend your time for them. That's the whole point of this life. It's not just for priests and social workers. It's for everyone.
Go out and make disciples.
How else can we witness to the world of the love that we have for God and God has for us if we are not sharing it with others and rather than just holding it within ourselves? So go, reach out, get out of yourself.
Get out of your comfort zone. Go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. It's beautiful.
I think that's a beautiful way to end this episode, guys. Is there anything else that either of you wants to say?
I'm very thankful for the Lord for offering this thing for us, or this media, this platform for us to engage and have a conversation. I mean, we're meeting from so many different parts of the United States,
right.
And we're synced all together. That's that's just amazing. I thank God for that. I really adore Him.
Thank God.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I was just thinking when I was on the national board, we had this conference calls, but over phone. So it was like a conference line. We couldn't see each other, we could just hear each other, and sometimes the line would drop off. But now we can see each other, we can, talk without any lag or any buffering or anything like that. So thank God that we are able to use the technology to its fullest. So yeah, it's good. Thank you guys for making the effort to do this too. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Achin, for coming and spending your time here with us. We know you're incredibly busy. You shared,
I know
all of the things that you do, and it is absolutely every moment that we get to have with you is really a blessing. And of course, we pray for many more moments like this to come in the future where we get to have discussions, whether in a group setting, in a private setting, personal setting, and we hope the audience as well. If you guys have ways to reach out to Jerry Achin, how can people reach out to you?
Pick your mode. I'm available by email, phone, Snapchat, whatever. I don't have Instagram, but pretty much anything else. My email is fatherjerrymathew@gmail.com. FR Jerry, Jerry, Mathew, Mathew @gmail.com. So my information is it's on our MCYMNA website. It's on the eparchy website. So yeah, please reach out. If you just need to vent, it's okay. Just reach out. I'm here for you. That's why, I'm a priest for you.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much again, Father Jerry. And thank you everyone for listening. Before we end it off, or the way to end it off that we usually do it, since we have an Achin here, Achin, can you give us a final blessing?
Sure.
Yes.
The love of God the Father, the grace of the only begotten Son, and the communion and abiding presence of the Holy Spirit be with you all, with your intentions, with your struggles, and with the plan that God has for you forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Hey guys, thanks for tuning into this episode of Tea with Thomas. We hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. Don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to our channel for more conversations. If you'd like to help support us, check out the links in the description.
If you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like for us to talk about, please feel free to put them in the comments below. We would love to hear from you guys.
And for more behind-the-scenes content and updates, follow us on our Instagram at Tea with Thomas. Until next episode, stay curious, stay blessed, and let's continue to share our Catholic voices and ideas to this world. May the good Lord bless you all. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.